So we'll talk about the candle of love today, but as usual, I want to start off with a little humorous story. I found a story about a receptionist who called Mr. Smith and said that he needed to come in right away to get his results from his blood work at the doctor's office. She explained the doctor wants to see you right away to go over your results. Well, this made Mr. Smith a little nervous, so he and his wife rushed right down there to the doctor's office. They were taken in to see him right away. And upon entering the room, the doctor explained to the couple, I was just looking over your results, and I can't tell you how glad I am that you could come in so early to see me. Well, Mr. Smith was really getting nervous now, and he exclaimed, what is it, doctor? What is the matter with my blood work? To which the doctor explained, oh, nothing, you're fine. I just want to leave the office a half hour early because I'm playing a round of golf this afternoon. All right. That's a whole lot of nothing for nothing, but just a little humor. So last week we began this series called Great Joy for All People. And we're looking at kind of the building blocks, if you will, towards an abundant life in Christ that's available to us. And the theme is based on Luke 2:10, where the angels visited the shepherds in the field, and when they came, their message was, but the angel said to them, do not be afraid, I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. And we want to live in that joy, that abundant joy, and have the joy of the Lord within us. You know, do you have great joy this Christmas season? We can. We're looking each week at lighting a different candle as we draw closer to the celebration of the birth of Christ. Now, last week we talked about hope and how we can have hope and what hope is, what hope's not, what it looks like, and I hope that you learned something from that. But this week we're going to talk about the candle of love. And we'll talk about much in the same way with three questions. I brought these up last week. Do we need more love? What is love? And how do we get more love? So let's talk about that first one. Do we need more love? And I want to suggest to you that there's 3 times in life when you will need more love. And not the kind of love when you need more love when you're shopping at the mall and it's crowded and there's traffic and, you know, there's one item left. You and somebody else have spotted the same thing and you're dashing down and not quite those kinds of times, but I want to talk about 3 other very specific times when you'll need more love. You'll need more love first to take the first step. But sometimes we're called to take the first step. There's a comedian, Jim Gaffigan, he does this little bit that's pretty funny, although you have to realize it's humor, and yes, it's a serious thing, but he kind of turns, looks at the human condition. He talks about how it's been kind of interesting watching the progression of the missile abilities of North Korea. And he says, you look at that and they're announcing that they can reach farther and farther, and they're doing these tests and all that kind of thing. And he says, it's like you remember when they said, well, we now have missiles that can reach Alaska. Well, I don't have anybody that lives in Alaska. We now have missile capability to reach the West Coast. He says, well, I don't really go out to California very often. Then he says, we now have capability to reach the East Coast. And then he says, oh no, this is getting serious. We're talking about real people now. We got to do something. And it's just a little humorous look that we tend to look at life that way. We're not really engaged. We don't really care. We pay no mind until something affects us, until we see how it impacts our life. We just have a tendency. Maybe we're too busy. We have our own problems. Maybe we're overwhelmed. Maybe we're stressed. Maybe we don't know what to do or whatever. But there's kind of a human condition that we often just don't care until things affect our life. But the Bible says that we got to take the first steps. In fact, in 2 Corinthians 5:14 through 15, it says, for Christ's love compels us because we are convinced that one died for all and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. He's saying that Jesus died for us. He took that first step. He came for us when we didn't deserve it, when we weren't asking for it or looking for it, when we hadn't earned it. He took the first step. And because of the love that he's shown to us, it should compel us to show love to others. And sometimes it means we have to go first. We no longer live for ourselves, but we live for Jesus. Now, I'm going to talk about this from a mission point of view of the church, but there's application in this all over the place. There's a lot, but there's application in the church, in your personal lives, in ministry, in our community, in society, all kinds of things where we need to recognize we need to go first. But think about it from this point of view, as far as it deals with church mission. And this is kind of interesting because we recognize that we are separated from other people by lots of things. There are cultural barriers that separate us from each other. There's all kinds of them. You experience these every day. They're all around us, even here, and certainly as we look further around the world. Those barriers of separation get enumerated upon themselves. But they're marks of separation that separate or make us distinct from each other. So what I'm talking about, things like age. There's an age gap. Different generations have a different culture. There are language barriers. There are traditions that we keep that are different. There are beliefs and values that are different from other people around us. Families create barriers between other families. Their priorities are different, genders are different, religion is different, ethnicity is different, distance is different, physical abilities is different, emotional state, education, economic situation. All these things are marks of degrees of separation between us and other people around us. And these separations cause us to kind of cluster with people who are like us. In the church, we typically, and I've got a little graph, we typically kind of orbit just down in the lower section with only 1 or 2 degrees of separation that we can put up with. And a lot of churches, you look at a lot of churches, and as long as you fit in with what they already look like and you already are like them, you can belong. And it's really, it's actually a real rarity to see churches that are able to cross lots of boundaries and barriers to be diverse. And so the problem is with attractional ministries, which is the most common way churches are trying to grow these days, is by having better programs and having more things to offer and better ministries. You see how great we are, come and be like us. What's interesting is most churches today in attractional ministry form are asking the rest of the world to jump over every barrier between us and them to come and be like us and hear the message of Jesus Christ. We're asking them to do all the work of getting across these barriers. How is that love? In fact, as soon as some radical person comes along with brilliant ideas of how to jump across those other barriers and get out into their world, you'll find out pretty quickly how much love is in the church. I need to tell you, this is really convicting my heart today. What am I doing? Where am I going? Who am I willing to talk to that's different from me? What barriers am I willing to cross and go first in trying to reach somebody, being compelled by the love of Christ to show love to them? Love goes first. Sometimes you need to be the first to say, I'm sorry. Sometimes you need to be the first to say, I can help. Sometimes you need to be the first to say, Lord, here I am, send me. Sometimes you need to be the first to make a phone call, to check on a friend, to write a card, to step out and do something that shows love to somebody else. Love goes first. Now, the second one, you're going to need more love to forgive others. And the amens have quieted in the room. Ephesians 4:25 through 27. Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of us speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. You know, I got this in my notes later on, but I just need to say this right now and probably again. Love is such a huge topic, there's no way we're going to do it justice this morning. So quickly, briefly, you know, in this text, there's just three things that just kind of leaped out at me. First of all, we want to make sure that we give no opportunity. Some translations say give no foothold to the devil. We don't want to let him have a grip on our life. And if we hold anger, if we hold bitterness, if we hold resentment towards another, it gives the devil an opportunity to steal you away. Now, the second one is practical, and it should just speak to us. It also says that we will feel better. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Give your anger away immediately. Give it away because it's ruining your life. It's ruining your heart. It's blackening your soul. You feel miserable and awful, and you treat everybody terrible. So get rid of it. Just give it up. But the third one at the beginning of this little section I thought was interesting too. It says that I think we need to think about this issue of forgiveness if we want to learn how to speak well with our neighbor. It talks about speaking the truth with his neighbor. And we don't mind speaking truth to our neighbor when we don't like what they're doing and we just start yelling at them and we're upset with them and we're angry with them and we're coming at them. But what about the kind of connection with the neighbor that builds bridges, that speaks carefully, that brings healing, and shares the light of Christ? So if we want to effectively love the world, we need to first learn how to forgive and not carry around bitterness that separates us. Okay, and then the third time that you might need a little more love in your life is if you're ever called to go the extra mile. You see, as Christians, we're called to a supernatural love. That's a love that is more than nice feelings or simple kindness or just being friendly. This is a love that goes beyond that. It's a love that's more than a feeling associated with pleasurable emotions or things that have gone well. Jesus calls us to a love that goes into action and even reaches above and beyond what is maybe normal or expected. A love that is supernatural. Because of the love of Jesus Christ, you are called to give sacrificially. You're called to help a neighbor in need. You're called to help a stranger in need. You're called to take the higher road. You're called to love your enemies. You're called to be humble in spirit. You're called to control your tongue. You're called to be patient with others. You're called to pray for those who persecute you. You're called to turn the other cheek. You're called to go the extra mile. And that's not easy. Christians are meant to be the most love-focused, love-pursuing, and love-dispensing people on the planet. John 13:35 says, "By this all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love one for another." And it begs the question, do people know that I'm a follower of Jesus Christ because they can see the love in how I walk? Adoram and Ann Judson were married at age 25, and they boarded a ship heading for Burma just 2 weeks later. Their impact for Jesus was slow as they became missionaries in Burma, but they were trying to work with the indigenous people, make friends, and teach them about Jesus Christ. However, their work led them to become imprisoned. Mostly Adoniram. He was imprisoned and tortured for his faith in Jesus Christ and for speaking out about him. Then Anne passed away at the age of 37, but Adoniram continued the work for 40 years. By the time of his passing in 1850, he had planted 100 churches with 8,000 followers and had translated the entire Bible into the Burmese language. They gave up all. They gave all that they had, and they went the extra mile. And he left an impact in the world, and the people were changed forever. You are called not to be comfortable and not to be safe. You are called to take risks and to go farther than what's expected, to live higher and better than anybody else as we represent Christ in the world. Okay, so what is love? I like to ask this question to young couples wanting to get married. They're so in love. They have all this passion and desire. The sun is shining brighter. The birds are chirping louder. You know, they're just so excited about their brand new life and this wonderful adventure that awaits them as they get married. And so then, you know, and they're telling me all about this, and, you know, because I like to ask them where they met, and, you know, what was it like dating, and how did he ask the question, and all that kind of stuff. And they're just, you know, brimming from ear to ear. And they say, so how do you know that you're in love? And, you know, typically I usually hear, we can't stand to be apart from each other. We want to spend the rest of our lives together. We want to wake up beside each other every morning. I can't imagine my life without him or her. So after I finish throwing up in the bathroom and I return, I say, well, now let's talk about what love really is. So there's 4 kinds of love in the Bible, and that will at least get the most attention. And just again, real quickly, I want to talk about the 4. There's eros love, which is kind of romantic love between husband and wife. There is storge, which is a family love, or the bond and connection between parents and children, between siblings, and so on. Then there's philia love, which is like the bond of friendship. That is kind of it's also a more generalized, it's about the things that you love and enjoy, friends, and maybe things in life that you really find joy in. It encompasses things like caring for one another, showing respect, having compassion for people in need would also be a part of this kind of love. Back in October, during Pastor Appreciation, Mark gave me a kiss on the cheek to show me his filial love. And then agape is often referred to as God's love because it's the highest form of love. It's a divine love. It's a perfect, unconditional, and sacrificial kind of love. Now, again, this is a huge topic, and so I just want to give you a couple of thoughts on this. All these types of love are good. There's nothing wrong with any of these kinds of love. It's just a way of describing different forms of love, if you will, that we might experience. Kind of like hope last week. We talked about different kinds of hope. And so these each are different kinds of love. Agape gets the most attention when we're talking about love in the church, but there's really nothing wrong with the other kinds of love. To have a passionate love for your spouse, to have a family that you love, to have friends that you love, and so on. And then the second thing is, all those are good, and you want to grow in all 4 types of love. Enjoy more passion in your life. Strengthen the bonds of friendship. Love your family. In 1 John 4, 7 through 9, it says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. And whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. And anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. In this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him." So we want to grow in all types of love. And the last thought is that agape love is the one that cultivates the other types of love. It's the one that feeds the rest of them. It's the love that's built on a foundation of something other than our feelings. This love is a little different. Notice that the first kind of love are emotionally charged and very contingent upon how we feel towards people or a situation. It's a love that is fueled by our emotions. You love because you feel like loving. But the last kind of love, agape love, is radically different because it is really based on choice and action. Agape love is not simply an impulse generated from feelings. Rather, it's an exercise of the will, a deliberate choice. It's a movement to do what is right. For example, this is why God can tell us to love our enemies. He's not telling us, have warm, cozy, fuzzy feelings about your enemies. That wouldn't make sense. He's not saying when the people mistreat you and persecute you or do harm to you that you should feel good about it and that you should love. But instead, even towards your enemy, you can act in loving ways towards them. You can choose to be kind. You can choose to show respect. You can choose to be self-controlled. You can choose to hold your tongue from gossiping. We also want God to bless and redeem everyone. And so our light shines in love and in hope that they might want to come to know Him, even if they are against us and Him at the moment. So this agape love, this love that is about what we choose and about how we act, is a very different way to love the world. And why God calls us to a better way, a better kind of love. And it's the kind of love that He first showed us. So how do we get more love? There's $1 million question. How do we get more love? How do we grow our capacity for love? Well, I'm going to suggest 3 things. 1, first, you have to know God. Remember, we read in 1 John 4 that love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. You cannot know love if you do not know God. It comes from Him. And it becomes a part of us as we get to know Him more. As we realize that He is love, and we realize how He loves us, and we realize what He has done for us, then we begin to love more and to know more love. It's the only way that we can grow our love is by knowing God. And we talked about last week spending time in the Word. Things that you can do this Christmas season, maybe especially to draw near to the Lord. And to get to know Him and what He's done for you and what He's saying to you in His Word. Washing your mind with His words. Second of all, draw near to God in prayer. Draw near to the Lord in prayer. It's not just about knowing Him, we want to draw near to Him. Verse 16 said that God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God. Yeah, we've been kind of talking about these poinsettias and how beautiful they are, but they don't seem to last real well beyond Christmas. Every time we move them, we leave trails of leaves and petals and things because they. And I don't know. I don't know a lot about them. I'm just kind of having a thought here. I don't know if it's because they only live a season, or is it because they've been transplanted. We're trying to give them water and sunshine. We move them every week. Diane's been moving them every week, trying to get them sunshine, and yet, despite all best efforts, they just start kind of decaying. And I do know that any fruit, any tree, any branch, any plant, anything that is not attached to the vine, to get the nourishment, to draw the life-giving water, to find the food that replenishes and builds. It can't live, it can't grow, it can't exist. It begins to die and decay. And so it is in our walk with Jesus Christ. If we're not living a life of prayer, how can we abide in God? And how can we get the love to fill our lives that we need to live the kind of love He calls us to live? You won't be able to have a supernatural love if you don't live a supernatural relationship with the God that gives you the love. And we have to abide with Him if we want to learn how to love. Who do you need to love in your life right now? Who comes to mind? Are there people you need to forgive? Are there people this Christmas season that... This happened to us in the mall yesterday, I'll admit it. We were coming down the escalator, and we saw somebody that was shopping. We actually said, hey, let's look this way. Maybe they didn't see us yet. Now, the only reason, I'll say that we like them, we enjoy them, it's just we had only a couple minutes and we were on the run. We haven't seen them in a while. It takes a while to get caught up, and we'll see them again soon. So it's not like we were avoiding them because we didn't like them. We weren't. I won't tell you where it was because maybe some of you were there yesterday and you know, oh, it was me. It was, yeah. Dave's going, I saw you too and I went the other way. We're fine. But maybe there are people in your life that if you did see them, you did run into them, you would rather go the other way. You would want to take a different path. You would hope to not have a conversation. Maybe something rises in you right away. And you remember things that have been said, things that were done, things that have happened. Who do you need to forgive? Where do you need to love? Maybe you're having a hard time getting through this Christmas season because of the pressures and the responsibilities and all that's expected. Maybe there's somebody that God's put in your life, and they're very different from you. And you don't know what to say. You don't know how to talk to them. You don't know how to relate to them. You're not interested in going into their world. But God might be calling you to be the one that jumps over a barrier or two, to be a light in their life. I don't know what it is. Make sure it's only from what God would say. But where do you need to love? How do you need to love? Where do you need to go the extra mile? And not wait for how you're treated before you'll decide how you're going to treat others. The only way to have that kind of love is to abide in God. And the third one, the way to grow your love is you have to live out His commands. Jesus said, John 14:21, whoever has my commands and obeys them, he is the one who loves me. There are people who say they're Christians. They may even say they love God. But their lifestyle is contrary to the will of God. That is not love. It's not enough to just look for the feelings of an attraction that you might want to experience in the presence of God. And it's not how we talk about God. It is about how we walk in obedience to God's call upon your life. We have to live out His commands in where He's guiding us and what He's saying and how we ought to live, what kind of people we ought to be. We have to think about how we're living our lives and do the things that God calls us to do. Sometimes it's like, as Christians, we just figure if we just know the commands, if we just read the commands in the book, that's enough, isn't it? Maybe we could sit around and talk about the commands. Maybe we could get a class going or something, and we can discuss the commands of God or what it should look like in other people's lives to live out those commands. You know, now we're living love. No, it's only when we walk in obedience to what God is calling us to do. and begin to live out his commands, and we begin to take steps towards walking in love, because love isn't a feeling if we're going to experience God's love. As we recognize this Christmas season, and we think of him giving up his son and sending him into our history and into our timeline and into our world, and I think we understand that Jesus didn't really feel like going to the cross. On that night of prayer with the Lord, he even battled with God a little bit. God, if there's any other way, if there's something else you can do, hey, it's the 11th hour and maybe you've got another plan, Lord. Don't, take this cup from me. But after he strengthened his spirit in the Lord, he rose up and he walked to the cross. And sometimes we need to step into the commands that God has upon our life in obedience and in trust and in faith. And let that be a demonstration of our love, irregardless of how we feel in the moment. And if we do these things, God can begin to grow love within us. So how's your love? Do you feel close to the Lord this Christmas season? Do you feel near to him? Do you know him at all? Maybe there's one in the room that hasn't surrendered your life to God. Is there one that is just holding back? And the music is nice and the stories of the manger scene and this young couple struggling through life to give birth to this baby. But the hearing of the story and the tradition of it all is kind of beautiful. But you haven't met him as the Savior of the world? Do you know God today? Or maybe you need to draw near to the Lord today. Maybe you're, like last week, we talked about times in life when we're red hot for God. And drift happens. And pretty soon you're kind of pink for God. And drift happens. And pretty soon you're maybe a little white with a reddish hue in it for God. And you're not drawing near to him and abiding in him. You need to increase your prayer life and your time with the Lord. Or maybe for you, you know the Lord, you're trying to draw near to him and his word, you're trying to build your prayer life, and you're just wondering where he's sending you, where he's calling you, where he's taking you, and you say, Lord, I'm ready to go the extra mile. I'm ready to take the first step. Here I am, Lord, send me. What is it you want me to address? What do you want me to change? What do you want me to take care of in my life? And where do you want me to be an impact in the world?